How do you think the window has changed since financial fair play became a factor in football, and then the profit and sustainability rules were put into effect that we see today?
I think it's a negative impact. Um, I should never be on a screen. I should never be on the radio. I do 800 interviews a year, mainly to do with PSR these days, as PSR and rogue owners sort of dominates my life. And we go to football because it is the greatest escape from the mundanity of life. Uh, and it's not good that you've got blokes in pubs, and it is normally blokes, let's be honest. Yeah, I appreciate we've got a much broader demographic of people that watch football, but there's far too many blokes in pubs, both before and after matches, discussing PSR, amortisation, the use of academies as profit centres, as they are about how useless that new left back is, and the referee needs to get new glasses, which is what we should be celebrating. That's part of sort of the old school joy of football. We now have celebrity accountants and celebrity lawyers in football, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for the game.
Let's get into some data. I know you like that, Kieran. How far ahead do teams like Liverpool, who we know are the absolute best at this, how far ahead do they start planning which windows they'll be spending X amount of money in?
I don't think they plan on an individual window. They will have a rolling 1, 2, and 3 year project. They will know the ages of their current squad. They will know the expiry dates of both their players and players who may be of interest to them. They will have done their money ball sums, in not from a necessary from a financial point of view, but it's all about trying to get players that will complement the current setup and complement the current system. And they will be they already know who their targets are, certainly in the summer 2026. But they're also smart enough to realise that football is a very unpredictable game. What happens if one of the players who they thought would still be at Liverpool in 12 months' time has a injury or has a loss of form for whatever reason? And therefore they have to revise their plans. So yes, they know who their first, second, and third picks are for every single position on the pitch, for the next 2 to 3 years, and they will also take into account players who will come through who perhaps they hadn't spotted, and who are up and coming. The amount of background work that's undertaken by Richard Hughes, and if anybody's read Ian Graham's book, How to Win the Premier League, which is gold dust in terms of the long-term strategy, and the fact that FSG believed in the nerds over some of the Liverpool managers, is testament to the club's success.
Talk to us a bit about Arsenal, who were, especially in the post-Emirates years, famous sort of for their austerity in the transfer market, whereas now they are spending as much, if not more, than their rivals.
Well, when Arsenal first had the transition from Highbury to the Emirates, there were very significant capex construction costs of the stadium that absorbed cash. Stan Kroenke is known as Silent Stan for two reasons: A, his unwillingness to talk, and B, his unwillingness to open his wallet. So therefore, Arsenal had to be effectively self-financing to a certain extent. That they did borrow some money, the funds to acquire the Emirates. It then took time to acclimatise. The interest costs were quite significant. That's coming out of the playing budget, although the club benefited from having a bigger stadium. And then I think they made some errors in terms of recruitment, as those interest costs as a proportion of overall revenue started to decrease. The club perhaps got a bit giddy in the post-Wenger era, and made some poor signings, and they became legacy problems. It's not right to name the players, but I think everybody can guess who was on very, very significant salaries and not contributing on the pitch. That's now being dealt with, and now they feel that with those salaries out of the equation, Arsenal used to be the second highest payers in the Premier League. That was disrupted by Chelsea. That was disrupted by Manchester City as well. And also Liverpool have overtaken them because Liverpool have been more successful on the pitch over the last decade.
If we talk about Chelsea, we start, I suppose, with their journey being when Roman Abramovich comes in, and then they are known as that club that spends loads of money and starts affecting transfer fees across the market because they're overpaying to get players in and giving high wages, etc. However, from the Todd Boehly years is a totally separate thing, isn't it? Because the spending has absolutely skyrocketed. Are they doing this for football reasons, or are they doing this for financial reasons away from what they're trying to achieve on a football pitch?
It's a really weird one because if you take a look at the accounts of a company called Blue Coal Holdings, and Blue Coal Holdings owns Chelsea Football Club and it owns Strasbourg, it's lost £500 million in sort of 2 years, which is a phenomenal amount of money. Todd Boehly sees the project as one of being huge disruption to football. He wants to be an innovator. Whether that's going to prove to be successful, and they would argue, look, we're the world champions, so it has been successful. We've won a European trophy, we have been successful. We've qualified for the Champions League, it has been successful. But that certainly is a huge cost. What I think Chelsea do have as a strategy is we're recruiting young players, so therefore they will have value even if they don't work out with us. And where Chelsea don't get credit for is the ability to utilize the academy as, it's a horrible word, this, as a profit center, and that's how it's seen. It's not there to develop young children into talented footballers. That's a sideline. Your main aim is to become an additional revenue stream, and part of the reason for that is that Chelsea have got the lowest capacity. Yeah, they've got what, 40,000 at Stamford Bridge, perhaps 41. That compares. That's 20,000 less than Liverpool, 20,000 less than two North London clubs. It's 35,000 less than Manchester United, and Manchester City are going to a 60,000 capacity stadium. Chelsea have muttered about doing something, but nothing appears to be getting across the line. So therefore, their way of addressing that is to use the academy. And Conor Gallagher, Mason Mount, Tomori, Tammy Abrahams, you can go down, Grant Hall, you go down this incredible list of players where that's the equivalent of an extra 10,000 fans a season.
Kieran, let's talk about Brighton and Brentford and clubs whose sort of entire financial strategy and success as football clubs relies on finding and identifying players, helping push them on a bit, and then selling them. How difficult is it to see that model from maybe a fan's perspective? Because presumably you never want your best players to leave. And we've talked a lot, and there are so many great players that used to play for Brighton now playing for top clubs around Europe and in the Premier League.
I think you accept it as being part of the pecking order of the Premier League. Brighton can't afford to match the wages of other clubs. I'm old enough to remember when Brighton had the highest paid player in the country, in Michael Robinson, who signed a 10-year contract in 1982 with Brighton. And that was not good because it almost bankrupted the club. So, we know the battle scars of when things go wrong. I think we're quite flattered at Brighton that the club now has a reputation within the football industry. It attracts players because they'll be given the scope to develop themselves. And also the club said to every single player, if somebody comes in and matches our valuation, we wish you all the best. But the club's also smart enough to play hardball when necessary. So if we take a look at the World Cup in Qatar, two of the standout players were Alexis McAllister and Moises Caicedo. A lot of interest in them in the January window, and the club said to both players, "You've got a contract." In the case of Caicedo, who was desperate to leave, just go and train by yourself for a couple of weeks, come back at the end of the window, unless somebody matches our valuation. He came in and he was a model professional, wanted to be a footballer. Brighton got the difference between the 70 million that Arsenal were offering in January, and the 105 or 110 million that Chelsea paid. McAllister was fantastic and left Brighton's best wishes to go to Liverpool and has flourished there. It's a lot better having that model than signing a slightly more better known player who trudges along for 2 years and is then sold for half the price. Because you are seeing the players you agree. And also, I wouldn't say it's not that nobody wants to be teacher's pet, but at the same time, it's nice to get good grades in whatever you do. And you look at the recruitment of McAllister, Caicedo, Cucurella, Mitoma, and others who have, Mitoma's still there, but who have gone on to prove themselves in the Premier League, to prove themselves in the case of McAllister, a World Cup winner, playing for the Premier League champions and so on. And do say that, to be part of that development is very flattering. So the alternative is being back in the Championship, and I love the Championship, but I've done Rotherham on a Tuesday night, and it's something you don't necessarily need to do more than once.